Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where we're dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. Whenever I travel, around the country or give talks in different parts of the globe, really, I oftentimes get this question: How did you know that you wanted to become a priest, or what was it that forced you, or excuse me, not forced, inspired you to become a Catholic priest? And I always understand why they're asking that question, because they might think that I'm not a good candidate for the priesthood. And I would probably agree to that. I wasn't the best candidate for the priesthood. I didn't like going to church as a kid. I mean, honestly, if there is a kid that enjoys going to church, we automatically pinpoint that kid and say, you're going to be a priest. And that's really too bad, because you don't have to be a priest to enjoy Mass. You just have to see yourself as a child of God. But they ask that question, and what do I say? Am I going to go through my whole vocation story? As a matter of fact, when I entered into seminary, that was the one thing that everyone had to go around the room and explain where their vocation came from. And boy, it just came from so many places. So what I want to do, at least in this episode, is just kind of give you the very quick versions. And it really begins in the family. It really does. If there are vocations that don't come from a family because the family wasn't Catholic or wasn't supportive of the vocation, then that really is a supernatural thing. But the majority of vocations come from the family, particularly when they understand that faith is critical for mom and dad. There are some statistics out there they talk about, like if mom and dad practice the faith, there's like a 60% chance that the kid is going to practice the faith. If it's mom only, then it's like 30%. But if it's dad only, there's 60% chance that kid's going to practice the faith. Why is that? Well, because for faith, for women, it comes naturally. For men, it's truly supernatural, because to see your dad depend on God, that's a big deal. And I saw that in my dad. So my vocation came certainly from my mom and dad raising us in the faith. I still didn't like it. I got bored at church. I was obnoxious sometimes. I know that's very surprising, but I was kind of cantankerous, and I was very easily distracted. However, I went to church because I didn't want to get in trouble, right? But it also came when a new priest who was a missionary priest came and offered a mission. And I actually went because I saw this priest as engaging, as kind of relevant, as well as a different voice. So what am I telling you? I'm saying that your vocation can come from your parish, but it can also come when you see a bigger picture of the church. Because let's admit, some parishes are not very inspiring. I'm not making any insult to any priests. I'm just letting you know, I have seen a lot of churches and I've seen how they operate, and you're going to have some serious supernatural faith to sense a vocation from that, because there's nothing that's really touching my emotion, touching my senses, whether it be a boring homily or an ugly church building, bad music, mean ushers. There are a lot of reasons why people don't feel or sense God's presence there. So this was a different priest. And he came and he had a different perspective. They say prophets are never accepted in their own town, which makes me respect parish priests all the more. But parish priests, take note. Make sure you're inviting other speakers who are capable and qualified and talented enough to kind of light that fire, kind of like do that whole revival kind of Christianity. We need some of that. A third thing that happened in my life was that my brother, who is way more religious than I am, or I was, he should have been the priest, but he has 7 impediments, his wife and 6 kids, right? But he invited me and his siblings on a pilgrimage. I'll tell you where. It wasn't at the time kosher for me to say, but I went to Medjugorje, which is in Bosnia-Herzegovina, formerly known as Yugoslavia. And there's allegedly miraculous things happening where 6 children were seeing visions of the Blessed Mother. So guess what? We went and I saw the Church Universal. I saw some pretty fantastic, miraculous things, but I also saw other young people praying. You know, in my church, there weren't many young people. It was a great neighborhood growing up, but then all the young people moved out and it was just old people. It was really a shocker and a reminder for me that the faith is not just for old people, but it's just as vivifying for young people as well. So I saw this global sense of church. And then the fourth thing that happened was, this is where I get a little personal, I experienced heartbreak. Not from relationships necessarily only, but I started asking deeper questions. I'll just tell you, I'm old enough to remember The Breakfast Club, and if you know that movie, you're kind of old too, right? But there was this kind of interest. The whole thing about The Breakfast Club was a bunch of kids who were in trouble, were put in detention on a weekend, and they just started talking about deep stuff and how their family lives were not always great. My family, we were great. We were far from perfect. And growing up, Filipino American, I struggled with who I was as do I fit in? And so I was starting to ask the deeper questions as to what am I going to do in my future? What am I going to do with my life? I started asking questions about the meaning of love. The internet wasn't available, but there was at least news and TV. And so technology was growing and it was becoming distracting. And so just like everybody else growing up, I needed to ask the deeper questions, and I did. And it just required me to think that if I'm asking these questions, where am I going to get these answers? So I started to do research on my own, and it kept bringing me back to the Catholic Church, kept bringing me back to God. So all of these things happened, and eventually I went on a few retreats, got more involved in the church. I started teaching religious education, doing youth ministry, plus leading the folk group at the time, music ministry, and just getting involved. I started to realize that this actually makes me happy. You don't have to be a priest or a nun to get involved and make these things happy, make these things make you happy, but it kind of filled me with a joy and a spirit and a love. And so slowly, I got more confident in my vocation. I made the phone call to the vocations office, hung up on the guy when he picked up the phone, then got the courage to call him back. He asked if I called earlier, and I said, no, that wasn't me. So I basically lied to my vocation director. Then he asked me what my name was, and I told him my name was Mike. I lied to him again. I mean, this is not a good start for a vocation, right? But I was just so nervous. It's almost like you asking a girl out for the first time. It was just that nerve-wracking. But as soon as we had a deeper conversation, and that's really the key, families have to get deep in their faith. Parishes need to get deeper in evangelization and catechesis and the charismatic experience of God. We need to get deeper into the church's activities, especially through pilgrimages and retreats. And then we need to get deeper in our own investigation. And once you get that deep, then you find God helping you to understand what you are called to do for yourself, for Him, for your family, for the church, for the world. So, a little bit about my vocation, and I hope this helped you in understanding your vocation. And we certainly hope that you enjoyed this. If you want to learn more and support our efforts and to be part of our community, just join us on our Patreon. It's a great platform to build community where we can interact with each other and where you can support the work that we're doing. And if you are a subscribed member and want to support us, you're going to get access to some more perks and some more deeper content between now and the next time we see each other. God bless you, and stay hungry for God.